What is the worst thing you've overheard while pretending to be asleep? Before we start, welcome back to Reddit Stories Hub. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Here we'll be telling you interesting, thought-provoking stories from Reddit. So, get comfortable and let's jump right in. Story 1. I was at my boyfriend's apartment staying over. His roommate also happened to have some friends who were dating there as well. I was in my boyfriend's room, and they were sleeping in the living room. They were definitely getting it on. Weirdest thing of it all were these literal banging sounds, like someone was hitting the fucking wall. The whole time I had to piss like a mother siacaire, but getting to the bathroom involved walking by the living room, and I did not want to risk it. When we woke up the next morning, someone had ripped a chunk out of one of the curtains, and the TV remote was snapped in half. To this day, I don't want to know what was going on in there. Story 2. I was sleeping over at a friend's house when I was 14, all of us on the floor in living room. I couldn't sleep. Two of my friends, guy and girl, directly next to me, start doing freaky things to each other. I was extremely shy and a couple of years younger than them, so I stayed quiet and hoped they'd stop. Had to listen to them for an hour while she made weird-ass moaning, squeaky noises, and he was singing, in a weird, slightly whispery, singy voice, Matchbox, 20 songs to her while he did whatever he was doing. That was the last time I slept over at a friend's house. Story 3. My mom and I were sharing a hotel room on a trip and unfortunately only had one bed, so we had to share that too. As I was trying to fall asleep, I kept hearing the text tone from my mom's phone going off and her giggling. My parents hate each other, so I knew it wasn't my dad she was texting with. Curious, I opened my eyes just a little bit to see that she was flirting with other men while on a trip with her family, and I was, in fact, staring at a dick pic. I couldn't really go back to sleep after that. Story 4. When I was 12, I stayed with my aunt and cousins for a few weeks during summer. My male cousin was 4 years older than me. One night, I was laying down in the loft, my sleeping quarters for the trip, and my cousin came home late with a friend. They came up to the loft, where they would normally hang out, and began talking. The friend noticed that I was asleep, asked my cousin if he could touch me. There was a whole back and forth about it, but in the end my cousin agreed to let him. His friend then proceeded to touch me. I was terrified and pretended to stay asleep. After a moment I moved a bit and rolled over, much like you would in your sleep. That was enough to get him to stop. I flippin' hate that cousin to this day. Story 5. My roommate's boyfriend and his friend came into my room when they thought I was asleep. It was warm, and I was sleeping naked with minimal blanket coverage. I froze and pretended to sleep. They proceeded to talk about my body and how it was anyone's type. Also, how easily it was to drug ladies these days. Oh, and also the friend talked about how easy it would be to sell my boyfriend's boat motor that he had stored in the room. Yeah, so they were kicked out, and friend became an ex-friend because she was pissed I'd let my boyfriend kick them out. Story 6. My then-boyfriend opening up our bedroom door to show me off to his friends while I was sleeping. It was the middle of summer, so I was lying butt naked on our bed. He thought I was asleep. A huge fight occurred the next morning, and we did not date for long after that event. WTF, man. I'm still pissed off about that. He knew I was naked. Story 7. My dad and stepmom were having a foursome with a couple of their friends. We were at a summer house, and they did it in the living room. I felt so uncomfortable eating breakfast the next day. Story 8. When I was around 8 years old, I was supposed to be asleep, but I snuck downstairs to get milk or something. I heard talking going on downstairs, so I stood still and listened. My mom was talking to my brother about how much of a problem I was and how she hated me. She always liked my brother more. I just silently crept back upstairs and cried myself to sleep. Good times. Story 9. I wasn't pretending to be asleep so much as they assumed I was asleep. My in-laws thought I was still napping after dropping my kid off at school, and they started to shit-talk me. They said I was a terrible mom. I didn't care about my kids at all, and they better buy a cake because I would rather sleep all day than make him a cake. It was his birthday, and my God, it was only 10 a.m. It doesn't take that long to make and frost a cake for him. Anyways, I cried in my room for 2 hours before they left to buy groceries, that is, drink themselves into a stupor, before I got up and made the cake and birthday dinner my child asked for. I didn't tell my husband what they said until a week later because I didn't want to ruin his or my child's day. Story 10. My mom and stepdad talking mad shit about me. I was in high school and needed to start CVing the counselor for mental health issues. My parents were essentially making fun of me, saying that I wanted attention, and started mocking my voice, saying, "No one understands me. I'm so mistreated." Story 11. I heard my ex talking shit about me to his best friend, about how he didn't even love me, he was just in it for the pussy, and my parents had money, so he was hoping to get a chunk of it. He had plans of knocking me up after I turned 21 and making me be a stay-at-home mom, so I would be stuck at home while he could be out doing anything he wanted. I was in the bed of his mom's pop-up camper on vacation with him. It's all screens, so I could hear their entire conversation. We took my car there, so he came to bed drunk and passed out. I packed up all my things and left him stranded. We were done after that. Story 12. I was stranded 20 miles from home in the rain and called my friend Chris to see if he could give me a ride. He called me a taxi to his place, and by the time I got there, I was exhausted. So he let me sleep in his bed while he slept on the couch. I heard a knock at the door and heard familiar voices. Chris was asking them to be quiet because I was sleeping. They started saying things like, "Hey man, just let me go in and say hi to her." Another friend of his was talking about how all four of them could gang me. At this point, I had my shoes on and was ready to run, but Chris managed to get them to leave, and after they did, I opened his door and hugged him and thanked him profusely. Needless to say, he was a great friend with some very shitty friends, and that night, he protected me. I was 16 at the time. Story 13. My mom's best friend and her daughter claimed I was stealing all the food and the special instant coffee. I was boarding there for school. It doesn't sound too bad, except that living there was hell. Their son was a creep. The father wasn't much better. Both thought they were hot shit and knew everything. If I wanted to wash, I had to share the bathwater after everyone else had used it. My money, clothes, toiletries were routinely stolen. I didn't steal the food. There wasn't anything edible my friends used to feed me. When they did serve food, it was raw chicken. Either that or they'd go on vacation without telling me and leave me in the house with nothing. I never told my mom what was going on until they tried to pin it on me. I was out of there within the hour and living with my aunt an hour away for the rest of my schooling. Story 14. Was invited to a childhood friend's sleepover. I had a feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there because I got a sleeping bag, while the other girls got air beds. Mum figured it was because I was the last one there. Couldn't sleep, so just pretended. My friend's other friend asked, "Why did you invite her anyway? Everyone knows you hate her." And my friend said, "Our mums are friends. I didn't ask for her to be here." I pretended I had a stomach bug so Mum could come and pick me up. Since that point, I refused to go to a sleepover and haven't had a friend round to stay either since. Story 15. In college, a group of us piled into one girl's dorm and watched a movie. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, everyone was gone except the girl and her roommate. They were talking about me, so I pretended to be asleep and listened. They were planning to let me sleep there all night and say that I cheated on my girlfriend. They also talked about trying to drug me or tell my parents that I drank too much and passed out. There was no reason for them to do any of that. As far as I know, they didn't hate me or have a crush. Just thought it would be fun to F up my life. Story 16. I used to share hotel rooms with large groups when I did the sci-fi con circuit in the 1980s. One of them, there was a girl from my class who took her friend aside and confessed in shock and sobbing that she had a lesbian encounter with someone who just took control. As in, she met someone, they got to talking, they went into the girl's hotel room, and the two of them ended up naked in the hotel shower, while the girl essentially sexually assaulted her. And my classmate was confessing that she sort of liked it, but not really, and she was torn apart by the experience and was going to kill herself because I can't be gay. It's a sin. It would kill my parents. Lot of crying, hugging, and her friend talking her out of suicide. These days, even though it was a girl who did it to her, it would definitely be classified as assault. But in 1985, probably a secret both of them will take to their grave. I was shocked, but didn't move. They may not have even known someone was sleeping there. I am friends with the victim on Facebook. She has a very successful, upper-middle-class life with a husband and kids now. Story 17. I was at a friend's 18th birthday party. Half of the party was sleeping in his house when the party was over. I was sleeping in bed with a couple. They were just kissing, luckily. Sometimes he slapped her butt with his hand, so nothing happened, and I am so glad about it. Other friends sleeping in the next room weren't so lucky because another couple had full-blown sex. So a lot of bed shaking, silent moaning and clapping. Poor bastards. Story 18. When I was 11 or 12, I was at the sleepover birthday party of the girl who I considered my best friend. I had gotten a migraine that night and ended up throwing up, but didn't want to go home, so I stayed. We all laid down in the living room at the end of the night, and I closed my eyes because I didn't feel good. All of the other girls stayed awake talking, and I overheard them talking about how lame I was because I was asleep, and that I was gross because I threw up. The typical tween girl nastiness. I think I told them I wasn't asleep, but to be honest, I don't remember. A few months later, this same girl told me that we weren't friends, and she didn't like me because I was a loser. Middle school was fun. Story 19. I was on a weekend ski trip with a guy I worked with and a bunch of his friends. It was mixed company, and we all went in together on a big house with a bunch of rooms and beds. There was lots of drinking going on. One guy was sweet on this other gal that was with us, but felt like he was striking out. I was in a room with him and one other guy, and they were talking, and I was listening, pretending to be asleep. The other guy was encouraging him to just go down to her room, crawl in bed with her, and stick your stay in her. She'll love it. She wants it, dude. Go on. I didn't get much sleep that night. I resolved that if he so much as put a toe on the floor, I would end him. Luckily, neither of them did. The same trip the following year, those two did not come with. Story 20. I used to work at a summer camp, and a couple of weeks before the kids got there, a lot of the counselors would show up to do site work and get everything. It was always a blast because it would just be us having fun. I have a friend of mine who I will call Dave, who was super awkward, and we shared sleeping quarters together since we were both directors at the time. One night, after a long day, I showered and went to bed, and Dave told me he was going to use his phone for a minute to call his girlfriend who lived in Canada at the time. I told him I didn't mind, so I put on my iPod and knocked him out. Somehow, my iPod died, and I woke up to Dave having very creative and loud phone sex with his girlfriend, which culminated with his beating his dick and coming. He was an English major in college and gave very descriptive accounts to the girl with me being wide awake. Story 21. I was at a resort we rented out with a bunch of fraternity brothers. The cops had been called to the hotel, actually not on us, but on some creepy locals that were hitting on women who were with us. We didn't know that at the moment, and everybody went to their rooms to avoid getting an MIP. I had been talking to another fraternity brother and another fraternity brother's girlfriend, her BF wasn't with us, who were in the room with me. We were trying to be quiet, and it was late, so I just went into my bed and turned the light off. I heard their hushed whispers, and eventually, sounds like he's asleep. Didn't say anything because I was trying to fall asleep and didn't know what was coming. They started doing it, so I was a first-hand witness to some egregious infidelity. Story 22. In college, I had a very religious roommate. I was sick, so I was lying on the top bunk of the bed. He came in with his girlfriend. They didn't notice me. They lied down and started planning in depth what they wanted to do when they lost their virginity to each other. It wasn't a bad conversation, but I felt so dirty and invasive for listening. I kept moving around to try and indicate that I was there. I even coughed a couple times. Eventually it just felt too awkward, so I hopped down, said "Sup guys," and walked to the bathroom. It would have been less awkward if they just had sex. Story 23. Not specifically pretending to be asleep, but I used to wear headphones without listening to anything, so that my family would leave me alone. Fast forward to the day I overheard my good-for-nothing dad, who was on disability and living in the house that his wife worked her tail off to provide, was on the phone with his creepy best friend talking about that time he did Lisa in the hot tub while her parents were just inside and how he totally should have married her after high school. In case you couldn't tell, Lisa is not my mother, and my parents divorced not long after, story 24. Had a sleepover at my cousin's house, so all the cousins slept in the living room together. Overheard my aunt and uncles in the kitchen, which was literally 3 feet away from the living room, talk about my weight and how I'd gained a lot between middle school and college. I was 18 and a freshman in college at the time. It hurt, but it wasn't the first time they'd talk about my weight. I was a chubby kid, too. It was just so surprising that they were so judgmental about my weight when they were also very overweight, too, and their comments were unnecessary and made me feel so uncomfortable afterwards. I pretended to sleep for a long time, and I haven't talked to these relatives years. You can assume why. Story 25. So, once my friend was going to have a birthday day party, and he invited me to go over and do stuff. He also said we would sleep over. That day, we were having fun, you know. I brought with me my PS3 and played some old games. My other friends brought their freaking PC, but when it was starting to be dark, we went to take a shower one by one. Let me just tell you that my friend's dad that was hosting the birthday party is really buffed up. When we were going to sleep in the living room, his dad told us to be quiet. We were supposed to sleep, but we were making a lot of noise. It was like 4 o'clock, and when we heard the dad walking in the room, we all immediately faked sleep, and when the dad came, he called his son. So they both went to the kitchen, and the only thing we could hear was some Spanish shit, because they are a Spanish or Mexican family or something. We also heard the dad grab him by the neck because my friend was gasping for air. You could literally hear it. At the same time, you could hear him cry, and when they both went to sleep, we all asked my friend what happened. He said that he was grabbed by his neck and nothing else. No one had the balls to wake up when it was day. I was still thinking about that night. I'm sure all of us did when we woke up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.